Well, all are welcome for Make It Count Monday. The way I think of it is, even though this is a program, run by NC State and their citizen science campus, and it's really targeted to the North Carolina community, what we talk about here is really applicable globally, especially when we get into like the ideas of what public engagement in science means, like why these things are relevant for society, generalizable lessons. I always ask, because basically part of the reason why we scheduled these guests are they're people Deja and I really want to learn from. So I always at the very end ask for like pieces of advice that I think a lot of students tune into these, but I think anyone at any point in their career can learn from. So there are a lot of good discussions ahead, a lot of good things to learn. And we are officially live on YouTube, as you might have just heard from the feedback. So if you want to find this recording later, it'll be on the SciStarter NCSU page, and it'll also be on YouTube, and eventually it'll be in a podcast format. So we always start off, before we get into introductions, just to give people some time to get into the room, with a poll. So I just launched a poll. I want to know, are you part of the NC State community? And this could mean you're a student. It could mean that you're on staff. It could mean that you just volunteer with NC State initiatives. It could mean you're an alum. We just want to know, are you affiliated with NC State in some way where you consider yourself part of their community? And it looks like 75% of the people here tonight are, and 25% aren't, which is, it looks like 2 people aren't, 7 people are. Very cool. Well, all are welcome. And you can, I guess, consider yourself part of the NC State community now because you're part of the Make It Count Monday group. You're making it count. So we'll end the poll there. I'll just share the results so you can all see them. And we have another poll question for you. We also want to know, do you live in North Carolina? I thought this was the funniest thing last week. Someone answered unsure, which is totally fine too. Sometimes I'm unsure as well about things. It's interesting. So it looks like the 2 people who aren't part of the NC State community don't live in North Carolina. If I'm assuming we have the same breakdown here. Or it could be different, but I know a lot of people are remote right now. So everybody's welcome. Glad you're all here. And then we'll do one more poll. For those of you who might be students at NC State, are you part of the Citizen Science Club? Okay, we got some club members in the house. We got some non-club members. Looks like the majority of people with us tonight aren't part of the club. So I'll give you one more second to vote. Okay, and we'll end the poll.
I actually have a really quick question. Wondering if we can turn this into a poll. I want to know how many people in the audience have participated in citizen science before, or how many projects they've participated in. So if we can turn that into a poll, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what projects. So maybe everyone, if you want to put that in the chat, I think that would be really, I would just love, like, yes or no, you've participated in citizen science. And if the answer is yes, what projects have you done? And if you have a favorite project, you can give that a shout out in the chat as well. And while everybody's getting their answers in, I'm going to give you all a quick tour of the SciStarter NCSU page, because that's kind of our citizen science hub week after week. So let me go ahead and, someone says chat is disabled. Oh no. How did that, I think I know why that happened. One of the events I was in got Zoom bombed last week, so I had to shut that chat down. All right, let me turn the chat back on. No, it should be on. That's so strange. Oh no, chat's on. Put it in the Q&A then if the chat is disabled. You can communicate with us through there. Looks like Dr. Gates has done Ant Picnic and Caterpillars Count. Okay, we got somebody in the chat. That's good. I'm guessing our 4th mysterious panelist is Dr. Karen Cooper. She's the only other one with the link, so that's my guess. All right, Oh, no, you didn't join with the wrong link. We keep it open. Someone says they've done projects on Zooniverse, and they're constantly adding observations to projects in iNaturalist. Very cool. And we have someone who's super new who says they haven't done any science communication events. Very, very, very cool. All right. Let me rename Karen. Dr. Karen Cooper. For those of you who haven't met Dr. Karen Cooper, I know most of you are NC State folks, so you have. But for our folks who aren't in North Carolina who are here, the Make It Count Monday wouldn't happen without her. She's been helping us every step of the way, showcase citizen science on the SciStarter page that I am about to show you. So you can go to this URL. I'll put it in the chat as well. It's scistarter.org/NCSU-home. It's your kind of your one-stop shop, except it's all free, so I guess it's not a shop. But it's one place you can go to get started in citizen science. So we have info about our season for Make It Count Monday, science and games with the Philo project. So you want to make that one if you're interested in health at all, or if you're a gamer. Very cool stuff going on there. We also have Chelsea Krieg, a lecturer in the English department, who's going to talk about communicating citizen science. So if you're interested in learning some good tips for science communication and hearing about some success stories with NC State students, that's definitely a good one to make. The Wild Sourdough Project, if you've been baking in quarantine, gotta make that one on 11/23. And the list goes on. We have a really great season lined up for you. We also have a tutorial on this page that we customized for the North Carolina community, but anyone can do it. This page is open to anyone who wants to participate in it. And you can click through this tutorial. It takes about 30 minutes to do. There are quizzes, there are videos, there's a certificate at the end. And even if you're familiar with citizen science, you might learn something new from it. We also have a number of featured projects on this page. So Crowd the Tap, one of our favorites. You can test your pipes, see what they're made out of, if they're made out of plastic, if they're made out of some other material. It's a part of an investigation for safe drinking water. There's the Sourdough for Science project, iNaturalist, a fan favorite about monitoring biodiversity, the Debris Tracker project. We're going to be covering that later on in the season. We'll have Catherine Youngblood from that project on the line. But it's a project that's supported by National Geographic, where you monitor plastic pollution and so much more. There's a lot of, there are so many different things you can explore with citizen science, and we thought these projects on this page would be a good way to get you started. And we also have the recordings of past Make It Count Monday events featured on this page, so you can easily get to them on the bottom. And if you don't have a SciStarter account, this is a page where you can make one. So it's on the left sidebar. A SciStarter account just helps you keep track of all the different projects you're contributing to, and allows us to give you credit for your participation if you're part of the NC State community. So we really recommend that you make one on this page. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. I'm going to hand the mic over to Deja to introduce us to this week's event. And then after that, Dr. Terry Gates is going to talk about his project, K-12 education, and so much citizen science goodness. So Deja, it'd be great if you can introduce this week's topic and just talk a little bit about what we're going to be thinking about.
Yeah, thank you so much. Welcome back, everybody, to Make It Count Mondays, the weekly citizen science show where we tell you about how to make your observations count. And so this week, we are going to go on a blast from the past, or at least I hope we do. And today I'm going to encourage you all to think about how things from the past can tell a story. Today, we are going to be talking about fossils. That means anything from paleontology to archaeology. And I think at some point, everyone who is interested in nature is interested in fossils and dinosaurs. And now this is just a theory, but I know that myself, I was obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid. I had this favorite exhibit at the Field Museum in Chicago that talked about evolution and just learning about these different things and what existed in the past, knowing that we would not be able to know about what existed before us without fossils. And so just the sheer thought that bones can paint a story about the past is mind-blowing. But what about teeth? What can our teeth tell us about an organism? And surprisingly enough, while trying to find facts for this episode, I realized that a lot of human dentists are obsessed with shark teeth, and for good reason. And this, a lot of dentists, they have on their websites a comparison of human teeth to sharks, and that's because sharks have some pretty cool tooth adaptations. So I'm just going to go through a few facts about sharks and shark teeth here. And number one, let's think about how they compare to us. So we have teeth, sharks have teeth. However, unlike sharks, we only have two sets. So we have something called milk teeth, which are our baby teeth, and we also have our permanent set that lasts the rest of our lives. But sharks rely on more than just two sets of teeth. They have an endless supply with a dentition, that regenerates constantly throughout their life. And in some sharks, a new set of teeth develop every 2 weeks. And then I also read, don't know if this is true or not, so don't take my word for it, but that some sharks can produce a new tooth in 24 hours, which is kind of mind blowing. I mean, I wish that I was able to replace more than just have more than just two sets of teeth. I think a lot of people might. Some of our, toothless friends out there walking around the world. But all sharks have tooth-like structures embedded in their skin called dermal denticles, which I think is amazing. Can you imagine having skin like teeth? And so these skin teeth provide protection to the shark, and they also offer the shark advantages during swimming performance, and they're able to reduce the attachment of parasites and other unwanted organisms that like to hang on and hitch a ride. And so these tooth-like scales allow the shark to swim with reduced drag in the water, meaning they can swim faster and more efficiently. And they also, fact number 3, have teeth covered in fluoride. So if that means that if sharks were addicted to candy like I am, they would be naturally cavity resistant. But thankfully for sharks, they don't have candy addictions. So unlike people, sharks are born with teeth, and they need them to survive in the womb sometimes. I don't know if you've seen Shark Week, but sometimes they show these images of sharks and sibling rivalry in the womb. And so that is one advantage they have. If you're born first and you have those teeth, you can, outcompete your sibling. Unlike most animals who have upper jaws attached to their skulls, kind of like we do, sharks bite from both their upper and their lower jaws, which is kind of scary. So that means it could be bad news for anything swimming in the water, especially since those upper jaws can detach and allow sharks to thrust their entire mouths forward for a bigger bite, a bigger reach. And I think that is probably the one thing that sticks in everyone's mind whenever we see sharks or we think about jaws, is we think about that detaching jaw kind of moving forward, and those membranes that cover the eyes, that image of the scary shark. But sharks are very important to the ecosystem, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever seen a shark tooth, they are not white as you might expect. And this is a very interesting thing that I found. So once out of the mouth, they sink to the floor, and they're covered by the sandy sediment, which protects them from bacteria and rotting. And so then these minerals are absorbed into the tooth, and it replaces the dentine and enamel, causing the tooth to take on the sediment's color, and so they turn black, which is really interesting because whenever I see shark teeth either being sold in stores or as a little souvenir, I always think that if it's black, that means that it's not real, but apparently that's not true. I also think it's really interesting that shark teeth can be sold, especially since there are other organisms their bodily parts can't be sold. It's illegal. So I think it's kind of interesting that people trade and that there's high value on shark teeth when we have things like bird parts, which are illegal to sell, or if we think about tiger parts or all these other organisms, especially since we cause so much damage to so many shark species by hunting them either to extinction. I think let me see if I can find this really quick. I think we take out, I'm not sure how many every year, but it's a really crazy number how many sharks that we kill every year, either for food or any other purposes that we deem necessary. But despite what Hollywood tries to make them seem, sharks are actually very, very important to the environment. And they've been around for 350 to 400 million years. So I think they know a little bit about survival. And sharks are so important because they keep our ecosystems in the ocean in balance. And so they limit the abundance of their prey, and this affects the prey of those animals. And so it really just makes sure it keeps the entire food web intact. So they are thought to be a keystone species because of how they help to maintain the structure of a healthy ocean ecosystem. Now, it's enough about sharks and shark teeth. How many sharks can we find here in North Carolina? I mean, I think everybody enjoys going to the beach. There are 456 species of sharks worldwide, and we can find 50 of them along the North Carolina coast, and 26 can be found close to shore. So if you ever decide to go to the beach and you love to, swim in the ocean, kind of like I do, just be aware. So we have sharks that can be found in the sound or in estuaries along the North Carolina coast. And those include sharks like the Atlantic shark-nosed shark, the blacktip shark, the bonnet-head shark, bull sharks, and the smooth hound shark. I have never heard of any of these species of sharks, which is kind of fascinating because Shark Week only covers such a small variety of sharks that we have out there. I mean, gotta give the other sharks some love. So sharks that can be found on the NC coast or in the actual ocean and not, the sound or the estuaries, that would be the black-nosed shark, the dusky shark, the great white shark, sandbar sharks, sand tiger sharks, scalloped hammerheads, the spinner shark, a tiger shark, and thresher sharks. Someone in the comments said bull sharks actually terrify them. I agree. In fact, I think all sharks in some capacity terrify me just a little bit, just because I am so out of my element when I am in the water. And oh no, we have sharks are somebody's worst fear. I'm probably not helping with this with the fear component, but
I think understanding is the cure to fear. And not to interrupt you, Deja, but I'd love to hear Dr. Gates's perspective on people being afraid of sharks. I mean, it's probably good to have a healthy respect for sharks, right? Like, be they shark fossils or the sharks of the present day. What do you think?
Wow, pulling fossils into this is a completely separate beast.
I'm trying to tie it all together.
All right, we'll get to that. So before I begin, I want to thank you guys for having me on. And for that introduction, I kind of feel like I'm done for the night. Like I don't even need to do anything else.
Deja does such a good job every week educating me. I learned so many fun facts. And Dr. Cooper just said, I'm not afraid of shark fossils. That's a great perspective to have here in terms of being afraid of things.
So the fear that people need to have about sharks is really very minimal. Now, there are times in which you should not go in the water because sharks are there. And you may remember, gosh, it must be 4 years ago now, maybe 5 years ago now, that there was this rampant just shark bites all up and down the East Coast during the summer. And it was because climate change was making the, global warming was making the water really warm, and they were just coming really close to the shore because that's where their food was. And since we like to go out to the beach, people were swimming at the same time that the shark's food was there. Bada bing, you end up getting people get bit. And so that's it. You should be respectful of them and recognize that you are going into their environment. If a shark gets out, walks into your house, it should be a little bit wary, right? So it's exactly the same thing. You're walking to the shark's house, you need to be a little bit respectful. That's it.
Well said. I love that. And Deja, do you want to finish up our intro, and then we'll pass the mic back to Dr. Gates to talk to us and connect it all together with citizen science?
No, I think that's great. I mean, I think he makes a really great point that we definitely need to have a healthy respect for sharks. It's one thing to be wary of sharks and to be a little fearful of them, but it's another thing when we let that fear drive us into eliminating them from this ecosystem, especially when they provide such a huge, important role. And so, my idea for this whole intro segment was really just to make everyone aware of all of the cool species that we have here in North Carolina. I know for me, it has, this is the first time I've ever lived near the ocean. And I mean, being in Raleigh isn't exactly near the ocean, but it's within a 2-hour drive. And so thinking about sharks and shark teeth have never been something that I've ever really had access to. So it's just a really fascinating topic, and I can't wait to learn more about shark tooth forensics.
Okay. Well, there is so much that I want to say, that there are bits and pieces and tidbits from your intro I want to just talk all about, because sharks are really fascinating. I think the two things that, oh my gosh, no, maybe three. Okay, so three quick things I'm going to pick up on. All right, first of all is about economics in North Carolina. So back in the 1950s, North Carolina was the #1 producer of scallops in the entire United States. But people went on this rampage of killing all the sharks. Now, one of the most important food sources for sharks is stingrays. And stingrays, one of their favorite foods is scallops. And so when you kill off the sharks, you increase the population of stingrays and skates. They then go into the estuaries and go into the calm waters, the intercoastal waterway, and eat all the scallops. And so when that happens, you no longer have scallop farms. And so we can see that there's a trophic cascade going from eliminating the keystone predators. You then have effects all the way down the food chain, but that also has an effect from bottom of economics up. And so whenever we think about animals and think about extinctions and endangerment, it's not just, imbalances within population levels, because we're not in a world where you can isolate one single system from another system. Economic systems are related to climate systems, they're related to biological systems, and the whole cycle goes around. And so in this case, we can see just how interconnected our economic system is to the trophic systems that exist inside the ocean. There was something else that you mentioned, I totally forgot now that I got into that. But the other really interesting thing is that a few years ago, people developed bathing suits that had the exact same texture that shark skin have. And the Olympics have banned them, because the people that would wear those shark Speedos, they have such an advantage in the water that they were just beating all these records. But they did it because of the suit that was on them, not because of mammalian skin. So I find that really cool. Okay, so where do I go from here, ladies?
Yeah, so we were hoping that you could speak to us, and we are getting more and more attendees in the room, which is great. Welcome everyone to Make It Count Monday. We'd love if you could tell us a little bit about you, what you've done with citizen science in North Carolina and beyond, and a little bit about our featured project today. As Dr. Cooper just said in the chat, where to go after shark Speedos. Well said. Where do we go? But yeah,
only downhill.
Perfect. Bring it all in. Tie it all together. But yeah, we'd love to hear about you, about citizen science and about your featured project.
Okay, cool. So I am from North Carolina. I was born and raised 2 hours south of here. And I got out of my small town as fast as I could. In high school, I went to the School of Science and Math over in Durham. And then I left there and then went down to UNCW because I was going to be a marine biologist. That's it. You know, from the time I was little, I wanted to study dinosaurs. My mom read me books all the time about dinosaurs. And then once I could finally do it, I read myself dinosaurs. And there was this iconic PBS series that came on in the mid 1980s. And I never saw it. I saw commercials for it, but my parents just didn't arrange for me to watch it. And to this day, I am upset that I did not get to watch this. I feel hurt, which is really funny, you know, because I was like, I don't know, how old was I back then? 8? I must have been like 8 when this thing came out, and I was into dinosaurs. So I went through my life loving dinosaurs, but thinking there's no chance anybody is really a paleontologist. These are just people on TV. It doesn't really happen. And so I got to my college, I got to UNCW. I was rooming with a guy who was also a marine biology major. And this dude was crazy about dolphins. I mean, like emotionally into dolphins. Every time I would bring it up, he would just go off the rails, all about dolphins. And he'd ask me what I like about marine biology. And I'm like, ocean? Because I did, you know, I liked the beach and I liked finding seashells, but there's a difference between having a hobby of liking seashells, liking the environment, making it feel calming to you, and having an inherent research interest. And so after rooming with him for 6 months and recognizing if it came down to me getting a job versus him, pending he could keep his emotions in check, then he was going to get the job over me. And so I had to find something I was emotionally involved in that much. It was paleontology, and there was nothing else for me. And that's when I started talking to professors. And it turns out that I met one who was teaching a paleontology course. And so I ended up taking that course, asked him for advice. And then some friends of mine from high school were going to university up here at Carolina and NC State. And they asked me to apply. And I said, sure. So I transferred. I didn't get into Carolina. I got into NC State. So I came up to NC State to be with my friends. But it was such a serendipitous thing because at that very moment, one of the world's most famous dinosaur paleontologists had moved to NC State to work. And so I went into his department. They gave me his name. I met with him. He became my undergraduate advisor. And from there, he basically got me into grad school by giving me a good recommendation. And it's all history from there. But I was all dinosaurs. I went out to University of Utah in Salt Lake City. I lived out there for 8 years. I absolutely loved it, but I did not take advantage of it the way that I should. Because there's just fossils everywhere, just everywhere out in Utah. And they have one of the best dinosaur records from Utah. I named 3 dinosaurs from out there. And hopefully soon there will be a 4th and 5th coming up. So after that, I moved to Chicago. Worked at the Field Museum. I was a postdoc there. And I don't know if I had a favorite, you know what, I did have a favorite exhibit. My favorite exhibit there was the plant hall. So they did up this plant hall, must have been the 1930s, and they haven't changed it because it is gorgeous. It's super beautiful. And it's so vintage that you can't touch it. So anyway, it's still my favorite. While I was there, I worked on the Sue project. If you guys are familiar with Sue the T-Rex, when I was working there, they had done all the research on the bones, but all the dirt from surrounding the bones was still untouched. They stored it away, and I took it. I washed it all into these really fine screens, and within it are the remains of the rest of the ecosystem. People think about the dinosaur age, and they think of T-Rex, they think of Triceratops. Maybe if they're lucky, they think of duck-billed dinosaurs, which is the group that I study. But surrounding all of these animals are frogs and lizards and small mammals. There's birds, but you hardly hear anything about them. And so in North America, most of the record that we get is from the sediment. You have one little element here, a leg bone, a tooth, this and that falls in. And so what I trained to do was to wash the sediment, pick through it, and then discover all the tiny remains that were left in that sediment and reconstruct the ecosystem from those remains. So based on that project, I got to name a new shark, which was really cool. It's a shark probably this long. It is just over a foot in length. Its teeth were less than a millimeter long. I named it Galagadon after the name Galaga. And the reason that it has the name is because I had arranged all the figures. I wrote the paper and everything, but I had no name for it. And I got to be really good friends with some teachers at that time. And I wrote them, I emailed them a picture of one of my figures. And so this is a series of teeth that were lined up in different views so you could see how the tooth looked. And one of the guys said, that looks like the game Galaga. And I remember I was driving down Sanders Street, whatever it is in Raleigh, and I almost veered off the road. And I'm like, Galagadon, that's it. That's what it's got to be. And so that's what I did. Karen asked to clarify, name a new shark, an extinct shark without a name. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Is that I discovered like a new species in the fossil record, so increasing the biodiversity there. And this shark is 66 million years old. It's really tiny, and it lived in the exact same river that Sue the T-Rex died in and was buried in. So it's really cool.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever really thought about the sediment and what all could be found around these like large fossils that we, fixate on. And it's just really mind-blowing. Someone asked in the chat, can we please really quickly tell us what the project is called? So the project that we are featuring this week is called Shark Tooth Forensics. And
I was tying it all together in my segue right here.
Yep, there you go.
Okay. I guess teaching such large biology classes for years and years has yielded its advantage there. So I was segueing straight into the project. And from this work that I did, where I was able to reconstruct the ecosystem, then came to North Carolina and got a postdoc where I developed this project, Shark Tooth Forensics. And Shark Tooth Forensics is not a 65 million year old project. It's a project that is very much East Coast United States centric, from approximately 20 million years up to about 3 or 5 million years ago. I hope to expand out. I do have some sediment from a little bit older age at this time, but most of the data we have is from this period between 20 million years ago and about 3 million years ago. So Shark Tooth Forensics has the aim of reconstructing the ecology of ancient sharks. Okay, that is the most broad question that you can imagine, because there's so many species of ancient sharks, there's so many species of modern sharks. How in the world can a single project tackle all that? And the short answer is we can't, but we can take a good chunk out of it. That's kind of a pun, right? Okay, so what I aim to do here is to have this project run for as long as we can possibly run it. And let me just start with a little bit of information about the East Coast of North America at that time. So we are in a very, very strange period. For most of Earth's history, there's been warmer climates than today. There was one other time, about 400 million years ago, where you had climates that were as cold as today. And then otherwise, you got to go back to about 2 billion years ago before climate got this cold. So this is a very rare time. And so that means if you have warmer climates, you have less ice in the ice caps, you have higher sea levels, right? So what that means is that Outer Banks, they are brand new. Just the last few 100,000 years, actually less than that, they're last tens of thousands of years they formed. Otherwise, they're gone, they disappeared. And then we can actually trace where fossils are found and where shark teeth are found all the way up in North Carolina, and basically go up to Wilson. So Wilson, North Carolina, and if you're from here, say Wilson, North Carolina would have been underwater. So about 15 million years ago, Raleigh was basically beachfront property. And there is a paper that was written back in the 1800s by a paleontologist who found seashells somewhere in Raleigh. We don't know where. But if that's true, then that means that about 50 million years ago, the ocean came all the way up to Raleigh, which is just mind-blowing to think that half of our state did not exist in livable, at least terrestrial, livable form for most of its history. And that we're in just this freaky time right now. So that's what we're trying to reconstruct. We're trying to reconstruct what were the marine ecosystems that existed from 20 million years ago all the way up to about 3 million years ago when the oceans fully went out. So that's the basic gist of it. And when I was the postdoc developing this project, my goal was to develop it for public school classrooms, specifically middle school. But since then, I've used it in college and I've used it in high school classes as well. And I think this gets to one of the real keys of citizen science, is that if you're developing a project, you need to have a question very clear. And I hope that everyone can understand we're trying to figure out ecology of ancient sharks. I hope they know what that means. But you also need to have data collection to be very simple. The simpler the data collection is, to my mind, the less likely you are to have data put in incorrectly. The more likely you are to have participants enjoy it, especially beginning participants. And when you're dealing with a school program, it allows you to input your project very quickly and students to be able to do it and then to enjoy it. But the real key to doing it in the school is having the reflection of the students. It's having them be able to take their data and not just do something for you, but to see their data. And there's been a really large push to have citizen science projects put into public schools and have lesson plans associated with it. And so with shark tooth forensics, we have a few lesson plans available, but mostly it's up to the teachers. Teachers can take the data that we have and they can do whatever they want to because they're the experts on education. They know what they're talking about. They know their students. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's you've covered so much already. And that's really interesting that students are, doing the science. They're meaningful parts of the citizen science. Do you have any compelling anecdotes or success stories from the work you all have done so far in the classroom? I always feel like those personal stories really bring it home.
Yeah, absolutely. How long do we have? Because, oh my God, I can talk about this stuff for hours and hours.
We have 20 minutes and we always want to empower the audience too. So everyone, as Deja and I ask our questions, if you all have questions for Dr. Gates, throw those in the chat as well.
Okay, well, there's one. This guy who's become one of my best friends, one of the teachers that I worked with years ago, likes to tell this story. And it was a student who oftentimes just skipped school, had terrible attendance, had terrible grades because he just, for whatever reason, there's so many reasons why students don't do well. And they did this project in class. And so I want to say that this project was part of the success. The other part of the success was the teacher. There's always that component. And this student, he sat by himself, he didn't talk, and he just kind of poked through the stuff. And eventually he found a tooth. And so he found the tooth, and the task was identify the tooth as best you can and tell why you think that's the case. And prior to this, the teacher had put up vocabulary, actual, real, legit scientific tooth anatomy on the board, and it was just sitting there. And this student, all by himself, just went through a book, found the tooth that it looked like, and then wrote down the reasons why he thought that tooth was what it was, using the real scientific terminology. And he was absolutely right. It's exactly what it was. But in that moment, that student was doing their work. They were collecting data from my project. But the thing that just gets me about this project, and I had no idea when I started, it's about the empowerment of each individual student. And it completely changed the way that I teach, because that story and then a few other moments that I recognized in classes was where I saw that students who were intimidated by lessons, were intimidated by deadlines and timelines, that were intimidated by competition with other students, all they had to do was just look through dirt. They knew what a shark tooth looks like. They could find a shark tooth. They could pull it out. They could measure it, and they have done something successful. The measuring is easy. And so from that moment, it becomes theirs. It's not someone else's, ambition. It's not someone else's subject that they want them to teach. It's their discovery. And they now have that encouragement from themselves to get it right. And so that is what really empowers me about that one story, because for once, for like one little afternoon, that student, he had his learning on his terms. And that's something I just don't see enough. And it makes all the difference in the world.
That's amazing. And we have some other questions in the chat, which I think are perfect follow-ups to that. And they kind of tie it together. So folks want to know, I guess the best way to do this is first answer what the end goal of this project is. Because I know you mentioned that you want it to go on for a really long time, but
yeah,
what would be the dream research outcome?
Okay, main research outcome is to put together a giant database of tooth sizes and tooth conditions, and to have that database be available for shark researchers to do some crazy multivariate statistics to try and tease out what was really happening in the ecology versus what was happening in terms of fossil preservation. And it's something that most people don't think about, and that what we find in the fossil record is not actually what was happening in the ecology. Yeah. So it's all in the winds of the amount of dirt that was getting pumped into the ocean. It was a factor of how many animals were around for 100 or 1,000 years in one particular spot. How did water currents push fossils together? So these kind of things all add up to filter out a lot of stuff that was happening in the ecosystem, and then dump on it a bunch of stuff that was happening in the geologic record. But with multivariate statistics and looking at lots of places up and down the East Coast, then I think we can start to filter out the geology, replace it with the ecology, and get an idea for what we're missing. So we need a huge database.
Got it. People want to contribute if they want to be part of it. What are the steps? I mean, with the main people who want to get in touch with you, should they be K through 12 teachers? Like, how could people take action?
So currently, I have this project only going in classrooms. Occasionally, I do it for outreach events, but classrooms is really where this thing is headed. And of course, I'm not doing anything right now because of COVID. You got to have people around in a classroom all together. So I don't really know how people can contribute at this point. I have a list of teachers that want to do it. I've emailed them and said we are just on pause for the moment. However, afterwards, I am always looking for people to come back into my lab to help it out with stuff. So we'll send sediment to classrooms. The students will look through. I get all of that sediment back because students are really good at finding teeth. And we figured this out statistically, and they're just as good as anyone else in the lab at finding teeth without a microscope. But that doesn't mean they always find the teeth. Sometimes they're hurried, in between classes or something. So I have undergrads sift through the remaining sediment. They then pull out all the other teeth and then all the other vertebrate fossils that are found in there. Like, for instance, you get stingray teeth all the time within these sediments. So we're going to pull all that stuff out, and we can utilize that in ecological reconstructions as well. So once everybody is back at NC State, all safe and sound, then we'll start back up with people coming in to help in the lab.
Got it. So for the students who are tuning in right now, Arteja, do you want to ask that question? I feel like our minds are on the same wavelength there.
Oh, I actually had a different question. I'm not sure what yours was, but I was just wondering, Dr. Gates, what are some of the species that you all have discovered from this project?
Amazingly, we don't know.
Oh, okay.
You have a good idea. So here's something else that you haven't thought about, is that the sharks that you find in the fossil record from, say, 20 million years ago, even though their teeth look exactly the same as like a bull shark today, are they a bull shark? Has a single species of bull shark been around for 20 million years? I would say no. I would say absolutely not. And my opinions of shark taxonomy, so the naming of sharks, is, I guess, a little bit rogue, in that I don't like naming sharks. And even though I've done it, I know I've done it, I'm guilty. I still feel like it has a lot of liberties, let's say, a lot of liberties that we just are not very sure of at this moment. So I'm working very hard not to name the sharks that we find, and not to say that it's a bull shark, for instance. Instead, I will say it's a tooth that looks like a tooth you find in a bull shark, or it's a tooth that looks like we find in a great hammerhead shark, that kind of a thing. But what we do find is that the teeth that from our fossil deposits look almost identical to the sharks that we see today. So the fauna themselves has not changed very much. We have whale shark teeth that we do find occasionally. There are some kinds of angel sharks. You should look those up. They're so pretty. So angel sharks, we have those here, but they don't exist here anymore. There are things like the snaggletooth shark that we have in the fossil record, huge, huge teeth from snaggletooth sharks. Today, their teeth are only about this big, and they only live in a small portion of Indonesia. So there's some really cool stories that we can tell from times whenever the oceans were warmer. We know that the distribution of a lot of sharks was larger, and now they've shrunk down to very small pockets, and that probably all has to do with climate change.
So I guess knowing that, we are going through global warming right now and the earth is warming up, is there any potential for the oceans to go back to the way that they were, where we had all these crazy shark species?
Hmm. I've never thought about that question before. So I would say yes, absolutely. I mean, we see on the land, we see migrations of taxa coming up north. So, extinctions of bird species like staying over the winter where they typically don't do. There's armadillos now that are rising up through the latitudes, going from the southeastern US all the way up. So there's definitely some changes happening. I don't necessarily see a reason why it couldn't happen. The biggest thing I would think that might be an issue is the position of the continents.
Mm.
So at the time, whenever you had all the animals distributed worldwide, something like North America and South America weren't together yet. They were just getting ready to join. And so there were several ocean currents that existed at that time that don't exist today. And that might have helped with the distribution of animals, but who's to say? I mean, I guess you'd have to get together climatologists, oceanographers, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I guess, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Karen said that I might need to figure out a way to run my project during the pandemic. And yes, okay, so I do have a plan. The problem is my time. That's the big kink in this plan. All right, so I have permission from Wake County Public Schools and Alamance Burlington School System, so ABSS, to run a little pilot study. What I'm doing at this moment, very, 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 very slowly, is pulling out sediment. I was going to show you guys how to do the project right now. So I have this bucket of sediment. I'm pulling out all the shark teeth, retaining all the sediment without shark teeth. And then I'm going to put a set amount of sediment into individual bags, then a set number of shark teeth with known sizes, number the bags, give them to teachers. They then give them to students. I get them back. I see how many teeth the students found, how many teeth they might have kept. And then I can, I hate doing this, but it's basically checking on the ethics of kids. I think it is going to be awesome. I think just totally great. Because once you explain that these are going for science, I've had students that come into class saying, here, I brought my shark tooth collection for you to use in your science. So I think it's all going to be fine, but we still have to test it to make sure. And this is a rigorous way to do it. My problem is I don't have any time to go through all the sediment to make our test kits. So if you guys can think of a way the Sit Sci Club can help, that would be phenomenal.
Speaking of, I have one more quick question before we end with the demo. But we have mostly students, I think, in the audience, or people who are in the mind space where they might want to start their own citizen science projects, or who are kind of deep into this work. What is your advice to students or others who want to do similar work to what you have done?
Well, shoot, I guess it depends on the project. It all depends on the question you want to know and the project. One of the things that I try and get folks to think about before they even start a project is, why are you doing a citizen science project? And I imagine this spectrum. And so on one end, you have projects like these astronomical projects where they have thousands and thousands of pictures that their computers cannot process, and that people are the best way to do it. And in that case, you have to have a citizen science project to have any kind of reasonable data collected over the course of, a lifetime. And then at the opposite end is purely educational. I want to make a citizen science project only to get students involved in science, when in fact, it would be faster if you didn't do that. Mm. So where are you on this spectrum? Okay, that's the first thing you have to think about. And the reason you got to think about it is because when the tough times come, you got to know why you're doing something. And so I think my project is right about in the middle, because I need tons of data, but at the same time, it also takes a lot of time to collect the stuff, send it out to school, wait, have it come back. But I also want to involve students as well. So if you're looking to involve students in your citizen science project, make data collection simple. You need to have you don't have to have lesson plans at all, but you have to have a few key bits of information about the project that relates directly back to standards, and maybe a few ideas of how you can do a lesson with it, because teachers are incredible at coming up with lesson plans. So long as they have the direction that they need and you're speaking the language of the teachers, then you're going to be fine. So simple question that people can understand, simple data collection, understanding why you're doing the project itself, and then if you're doing it in schools, providing key words that the teachers can hone into for their curriculum standards. That's what you need.
That's amazing advice. And I think in our last few minutes, if you have demo materials on hand, we'd love to see a demo of the project, or even just some fossils.
All right, this is going to be embarrassingly simple, so don't judge. Okay, a plate. We don't hand out porcelain plates to school kids. No, we do paper plates. All right, so it's very, very low tech. You also can use any kind of paper. You don't have to use a paper plate. Okay, I provide you the sediment, so I'm going to go down here. I haven't actually checked on the TV screen or the computer screen, so hopefully this works. All right, so we just take a little bit of sediment and we sprinkle it down, and wow, look at that. There's teeth. Oh my God. Who knew? Okay, so like there's a tooth, there's a tooth, there's a tooth, there's one, there's one. And so once a student finds it, they'll pick up the tooth. And we're going to come over here to this handy dandy measurement sheet that I developed for the project. And it's actually, I guess it's not really great to see on this angle. But this is a sheet that has a ruler and it has simple circles with different sizes on it. And so the student just places the tooth inside the circle, finds a circle where the tooth does not come out. So see that it just overlaps the 8. So you're going to have to go up to the number 9 circle. It fits in the number 9, and that's the size. Can you see that? There it is. Okay, there we go. All right, so it fits in the number 9 circle. That's the data that you collect. Now, do I have permission to share?
Go for it.
Okay, where is my stuff?
It's that big green button at the bottom of the screen.
Okay. Now I'm going to show you really quick. This is the lesson plan that I have. You see, it's very unpretty, and it's fine because the students aren't going to see it. These are the few quick lesson plan things you can do once a student finds a tooth. I have a very, very rudimentary calculation that students can put in. Okay, it's not actually that rudimentary. I went through and measured hundreds of teeth and then did some very fancy family tree statistics to figure this out that no one's ever done before. So it's the most rigorous size comparison you're ever going to have. But it's pretty simple. All right, so you can do that. And you can also do a little ecology experiment or a ecology lesson. But what I think is coolest is that you can scroll down here, get all this information, and go here. I have a Google form. And so we'll fill out this Google form, NC State. Where is my tooth from? It is from Aurora. And then specimen number is test, of course. So all this information is provided. And so the circle that's the best is the 9mm. And then there's two other pieces of information that I need. And of course, it's not wanting to.
You have to put a test number. Maybe just do 0.
Yeah, tooth number is 0. So we need to know which of these teeth does it most closely resemble. And I can just tell you that it looks like number 3. Now this, amazingly, and I had no idea when I developed it, this is super hard for people, especially when you get into public school kids, because they haven't developed the means to look at a tooth and estimate what's missing. Because the teeth have different shapes in it. And if you start to take a different shaped tooth and ask them to anticipate what's missing in it, what are they going to guess? I mean, they don't know. And so I am now starting to develop some quizzes online to train people how to do this. So I think it could be some really cool stuff. So it's a perfect tooth. It's a 6. Oh yeah, tooth rounding, and it looks great. All right, perfect. So I'm going to submit that. You can also submit a picture if you want to. And cool thing is, we can go down here and where is, oh yeah, we can click here to download the data. And so I provide this lesson plan to teachers. They go here and they can download the entire 1,500 tooth database. And it includes all the information that I had. And from there, they can do statistics in their classroom. They can have students do whatever. And it's only available to teachers, but that's the real data.
I have learned so much tonight. Oh my gosh. Deja, do you have any final thoughts for us or any final questions?
Yeah, I guess just wondering, have you heard any, I guess, success stories back from your teachers about them using the data, the complete data with their class to do, an additional project or what they found?
Yeah, there's one teacher in particular that's done a tremendous amount. She ran a fossil club for many years, and she would pull in data from the year before from her fossil club. And they would then begin to compare what people found in the past to today or to their current year. And each year I would give them a different site to look at. So they would then begin to compare what was happening in different locations, which is really cool. And in fact, it's the most rigorous stuff that's been done with my project to date. I keep naming dinosaurs, and so I don't really have time to work on the shark tooth ecology.
No, that's really awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deja, and thank you, Dr. Gates, for joining us tonight. And thank you, as always, to Dr. Karen Cooper for being our champion of Make It Count Monday. As a closing note, if you all go to that URL I gave you at the beginning, I'll put it back in the chat. You can find registration info for next week if you want to join us again for the next episode in the season. We also linked to the website for shark tooth forensics if you all want to take a deep dive there. I noticed some people dropped off. I'm guessing the Citizen Science Club has a meeting. And if you're a student at NC State and you want to join the Citizen Science Club, there's a link to do that on that page here. And of course, there are active citizen science projects that you can do, make it a part of your daily life. And I hope you all enjoyed learning about shark tooth forensics, learning from Dr. Gates about best practices for citizen science. And I know some of you are in a position where you can design your own projects and potentially work with students in the future. So I hope you all take his advice to heart as you go off on your citizen science journey. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night.